Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month. Join today.
Hello, my name is Dr. Mary Ann Dewan, and I am the Santa Clara County Superintendent of Schools. I serve as a co-chair for Silicon Valley Reads. Silicon Valley Reads is a county-wide community engagement initiative in partnership with the Santa Clara County Library District and San Jose Library that aims to unite the community of Santa Clara County through the joy of reading. This is the 18th year of Silicon Valley Reads, and our theme is Connecting. While the pandemic has forced us to keep physical distance from one another, this year's theme allows us to connect virtually, not only through a love of books and reading, but through cooking, the arts, nature, and more. For more information about the 2021 titles and events, please visit www.siliconvalleyreads.org. Thank you, and we look forward to connecting with you. Be well.
Welcome to Silicon Valley Reads. Started in 2003 as a one book, one community program, Silicon Valley Reads has grown to become a thriving community engagement initiative throughout Santa Clara County, including books and events for all ages. Presented by the Santa Clara County Office of Education, the Santa Clara County Library District, and the San Jose Public Library, Silicon Valley Reads gives our community new perspectives and understanding of important, relevant issues and encourages people to read, think, discuss, and engage. The theme for 2021 is Connecting. We are adjusting to living our lives in a pandemic with more solitude than ever before. This year, we are focused on finding our commonalities and talking about the things that bring us comfort and joy. We've selected 10 books to encourage everyone to find the connections that are uniquely meaningful to them, whether through relationships, food, nature, art, music, animals, or books. We hope you enjoy today's presentation.
I am so excited to welcome you to today's discussion with Always Home author Fanny Singer and her mother, renowned chef Alice Waters. In a conversation with award-winning food and wine writer Carolyn Jung, Fanny will talk about her unique childhood growing up amidst the sounds and smells of Chez Panisse in Berkeley. Always Home connects us to this dynamic relationship between mother and daughter through their stories and recipes, and we are honored to connect with them live in this special virtual conversation. Please join me in welcoming Fanny, Alice, and Carolyn.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dewan, for that wonderful introduction. I am so honored to be here for this event, which is near and dear to my heart, as well as to my stomach, of course. When I was a senior in high school, my friends and I saved up our money for one of our very first fancy grown-up restaurant meals. And of course, it was at Chez Panisse. And little did I know that years later, I would write a story about that restaurant that would win a James Beard Award. So I'm thrilled to have these two people here today who are synonymous with that landmark, and I'd love to introduce them to you now. First, of course, the founder, the guiding light, the champion for decades of local and sustainable and organic, Alice Waters, coming to you from Berkeley. And
Excited to be here.
Thank you. And her daughter, who is the co-founder of Permanent Collection, a lifestyle retail site, as well as the distinguished author of the memoir, Always Home, which is doing so well since it debuted last year that it's coming out in paperback any day now. So Fanny's coming to us from Los Angeles. Welcome.
It's so nice to be here, Carolyn. Thank you.
So I wanted to start by asking you, I know that you've mentioned that you were approached years ago to write a book like this, but you said no at the time. So why was now the right time to do it?
Well, I think we sort of have to back up for 1 second and just consider the fact that we're actually almost on the eve of the publication date, a year anniversary, which is just boggling to think of. It was just around this time last year that I moved in with my mom thinking I was going to be there for a couple of weeks and then ended up being there for 10 months or thereabouts. So it's just kind of a wild, near landmark moment in this sort of arc of this book's life, and it's kind of wonderful to revisit again after so many events that we did right at the opening. To be here to sort of look back at this year of how this book has existed and sat with people in this time, which was, of course, not what I was expecting at all when it was published. But to your question, it was when I was 18. I just started college, and I can't remember it was a big publisher in New York. There was an editor there who thought, there's a story there, about the restaurant and about my mom. And I remember trying to write a couple of pages, sort of thinking like, oh, maybe I can put together a book proposal. But I was just way, 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 way too young to be sort of thinking about the subject with any distance. And really this project came into being only on the back of another little project with my mom, which was the book called My Pantry, which we published together, which was a little recipe book that was almost an appendix to her Art of Simple Food books. And I was still living in England at the time, and we were communicating at that point. It was pre-Zoom. So we had, we were just on Skype and having phone calls and collaborating on this project at a distance. And then we went on book tour together. And it was that experience of kind of being embedded with her in this project, and then also physically on the tour, that made me really think about how much at that point, I've been living away from home for a long time, and I've been in England for close to 10 years, sort of thinking about how that relationship could be reevaluated from a greater distance.
Was it daunting for you? I mean, here you are laying bare your life for everyone to read. And not only that, but writing about your own mother.
Kind of yes and no. In a way, the stories flowed very naturally. The rubric that I set up for myself was only to write around food, to not kind of explore every nook and cranny of my existence. I mean, also because I didn't imagine that would necessarily be interesting to a reader. And so I felt like narrowing it to focus around those experiences that really had food at their core felt like a good way to not get into the, sort of weeds a little bit of more intimate things. And at the same time, like be able to speak to so much of the relationships, and so much of how we communicate to each other is in fact through food. There was a point at which my editor was like, Fanny, I mean, you have to explain that like your parents were divorced, or like there are a few like key things that you've omitted here that you are going to have to say something about, because otherwise like it's really unclear, all this other material that sits in the margins. So it's in there a little bit, but this somehow felt like a sort of safe way of looking at this relationship. And it almost let me be more intimate in those accounts because I had these boundaries.
So Alice, did you have final veto rights on anything in the book?
Actually, she did give me final veto rights.
As she should, right?
But she argued her point. And most often I gave in. There was only one little question, but I think that what really was so beautiful is the fact that Fanny's and my friend Brigitte Lacombe was photographing us at the end of when the book was pretty much finished, and that was so special. To have her sort of put us together, lying on the back lawn like we used to always do when we came home from church. We'd just come into the house, run out to the back grass and throw ourselves down. And she took a picture of that. And it made it feel like a lot of our experiences were coming alive again, especially the very special memories of going to Domaine Tempier in France, and our love for the proprietress, Lulu.
So sorry about her passing recently, too.
She was only 101.
Oh,
no, she's 102.
Wow. It must be all that wine, right?
But she had that joie de vivre. She never lost it. She had it her whole life. And I think Fanny so beautifully captures her spirit. Definitely. And it really tries to communicate why so many people around the world loved her. I mean, really felt part of her family. You know, I always say I was her best friend. Fanny says she was her best friend. And then we talked to other people, and they felt that way too. But she gave herself to you. She was so curious about what you were doing. And she knew everything that Fanny was doing. You know, at 100 years old, she's following her on Instagram.
So when you read the book, were you surprised by anything in terms of it made you see that Fanny saw something in a different way that you didn't know about, or that she felt something that you didn't realize?
Absolutely. You know, I knew all of those stories in a way, but it felt like someone else was in the room. But I looking at the same table setting and the same people at the table, but she saw something that I didn't see. And so it was all brought back to me in the most, I don't know, very touching way. I mean, some things she saw made me laugh. She has a great sense of humor. And some of it around me, making fun. But
that's what daughters do, right?
Is that what daughters do? Very aware of my determination. And I remember one of the first stories, she read it to me, and just to see whether I would go for it. And why don't you tell that story about you asking me what my favorite colors were, Fanny?
Yes. No, the opening chapter really is about my mom's favorite colors, which are maroon and chartreuse, which are not, I think, the typical answers when someone is giving, sort of shorthand like red, green. My mom would always say maroon and chartreuse, and I loved asking her that question. And so it opens with this kind of, it's in a way, it's almost articulated as a philosophy, because my mother's sort of love of these colors became also a kind of aesthetic approach. I mean, if you go into our house, you will not see many hues that stray from the darker purples and browns and maroons. And in fact, in these last 10 months, when I was living with her, if ever there was like a brightly colored garment left downstairs, because the bedroom that was my childhood bedroom is upstairs, I would see it like scrolled away behind a door, just there was a certain kind of aesthetic rigor that could not be broken. So I do get into the details of how that can sort of verge on a kind of obsession, but which is, I also grant, a really huge and important part of how the aesthetics and environment were considered around the restaurant and also at the Edible Schoolyard. And so that chapter, I think, that's part of the chapter called, or leads into a chapter called Beauty is a Language of Care, which is very much about that kind of
I love that part in the book where you talk about how aesthetics and the look and the beauty, how your mom is that matters to your mom so much. And I mean, I still remember when I think I sat down with an interview for the first time with you, Alice, in the dining room of Chez Panisse, and it was off hours. And you had someone put a tablecloth on the table before we sat down. And I was just so taken with that. Like nobody else I know would think of doing that. And that just speaks to how important a sense of place is for you. So speaking of that, Fanny, I know you talk in the book about the tea parties that you had underneath the tables in the dining room and how you grew up, where your mom would take you into work and snuggle you into a giant salad bowl or soup pot while she went and did her work in the kitchen. When did you kind of know that Chez Panisse was this special place, this restaurant that was such an icon for so many people? Did you grow up knowing this, or did you kind of think every place, every other restaurant was like this out there?
I mean, I'm trying to sort of access where my mind was at when I was little, but I think it was sort of both. I mean, at once felt very familiar. I speak about it as a kind of second home. And there was a sort of sense of ownership, not in a material way, but, ownership of the space within there, that it felt so familiar that I could take care of myself even when I was at the restaurant. I knew how to get a little snack off where the vegetables and fruits were out in the breezeway, and sometimes a naughtier snack, like sneaking a little corner off the galette round that was in the walk-in. But just how to, be in that space. And I think that was by virtue of my having actually physically been in that space from when I was a baby. But of course I was aware, especially as I was coming into consciousness and there with my mom when I was 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And especially when she wrote the children's book, Fanny at Chez Panisse, when I was about 8, where I was definitely aware of it as an institution, like that there were people who were regulars, but there were also people always every night coming as their pilgrimage, and it was so special for them to see my mom in the restaurant. And so we were sitting there, there would often be people coming to sort of pay homage or say hello. And I was keenly aware of it being unusual, even within restaurants. It wasn't like any other restaurant. I had some other friends who grew up in restaurants, and they were nothing like Chez Panisse. Chez Panisse really stood apart in that regard. And for many of the reasons that I do sort of speak about in the book, which range from the extent to which the restaurant is clad in copper in every single surface, so that, offensive materials like stainless steel are at least kept at bay or revealed to a minimum. But also that the restaurant's community is a family, which my mom has always called La Famille Panisse, and that sense of community, that sense of familial bond really made it feel like I was part of really a big family that would always look out for me, and that there was someone, to take care of, everyone. There was always a kind of network and a sense of reciprocity and caretaking that defined the environment there, that really did make it also very unique.
Well, I knew that Fanny really got along with the pastry chef, Mary Jo. And so I hired her to babysit for Fanny. And she didn't have any children of her own, and she just took that responsibility on, and is a kind of artist in the kitchen, but she loved to amuse Fanny back there. I mean, just putting raspberries on her fingertips. And, it's just something more than just keeping an eye on her. And I really loved that I could find these people within our family of Panisse that would take care when I wasn't there.
And Mary
I think you're going to make us all jealous now that we all wanted babysitters who were pastry chefs when we were young.
Not very many babysitters had pastry, and not very many children had babysitters who could make things like handmade lollipops, which we
Oh my God.
made together. So. And Mary Jo is still the chef at the pastry chef.
Oh, wow.
There was some years where she had a little restaurant of her own, and she's now back in the fray. And I'm still in touch with her all the time. And, you know, it's just, I've done that, and she feels like family to me, you know, which is was a special gift that I had that sort of relationship, both within the restaurant and also without.
So Fanny, I know you've talked a little bit about this in other interviews, and people are always fascinated about this. And for people who haven't read the book yet, can you describe the lunches your mom used to pack for you? What were those like?
Yes, the perennial question, but always a good one, because it was a unique arrangement. In the book, I sort of talk about like I can't totally remember the moment at which things got really sort of off the rails, or a more steroidal version of lunch, you know, because I did have a sort of paper bag, normal sandwich, I think, in preschool, kindergarten. But when I started to go, certainly in middle school, and then when I started to go to high school, which required an hour-long BART train journey to and from high school, my mom would pack these very elaborate lunches so that I wouldn't have to eat in the cafeteria at high school. Truly, like the Zoom window can't even accommodate the size of these things. They were like these really tall, insulated, almost like weekender bag things that had ice packets in them and multiple sort of Tupperware compartments that kept everything separate, and always other little accoutrements. So there was like real silverware in there.
Oh my gosh.
Napkin always. And then there was always a salad, which was undressed. So there's like a tiny container that had vinaigrette, sometimes two, if my mom was not sure which one I'd like more. Especially if one had anchovies in it, which I really disliked at the time. She would always like give me an alternate and just sort of encourage me to try the one with anchovies first. Usually some delicious little fruit macédoine, which was kind of a fruit salad, very quick fruit salad, but with lots of orange juice on it to sort of macerate and bring out the flavor. And then the most aromatic part of lunch was always the garlic bread, which would be toasted freshly in the morning and rubbed with garlic, which, if anything, is what made me both a kind of pariah on the BART train, but then really popular at lunch because it was delicious, like lugs of olive oil, really good bread. And then my mom had, which is in the book as an illustration, my mom had this list of instructions for, which was presented to me, I should say, on my 21st birthday, I think, by a friend who had been entrusted with my care when I was, I think, 12 or so. And it had many detailed instructions about sort of general lifestyle things and rules around amount of time I was allowed to talk on the phone, or what type of videos I could rent at the video store back in the day of VHS. And then there was a very elaborate, like fully diagrammed section devoted to the different size containers and which goes into each container. I mean, the kind of like detail that truly, I think, it was an unusual thing to be presented with as a babysitter. And I might be the only kid who really had, at least at that moment, you know, in the early 90s, that level of care going into lunch.
So I think we all want to know, did you just ever want to go to town on a bag of Doritos or a Big Mac instead?
You know, honestly, never. It's not that I never tried. It's not that I never tried any junk food. I mean, all my peers were trying that stuff, or some of them liked it. But the reality, I think, is that if you are presented with something that is both delicious and very good for you, which is the whole premise really of the Edible Schoolyard, you want to eat that. You know, it's like you don't rebel against it. It's like you actually thrill to those flavors and to that sensation. And in my case, it was also very clear that it was through food that my mother was communicating to me how much she loved me. And I could feel that quality of care. sort of transmitted in what I was given, for lunch. And because there was usually also a little bundle of herbs to smell or a little flower in there that was fragrant and little, these little nosegays and sometimes little notes. And, I know it's more work to do those things. And yet I don't think it's in any way sort of overlooked by the kid, even if they don't verbalize at the time their appreciation. I think it's very felt, on a sort of spiritual level, that the parent loves them and is showing them that. And so there was never a desire really to rebel in that sense. I mean, there were certainly things I liked that were sort of outre in our house, like I had a real sort of thing for sour candy, but it wasn't something that I ate in abundance or discarded my lunch to, eat instead. So I have to say, whatever she did worked.
Yes. Proof is in the pudding, in the book.
So Fanny, did you ever want to be a chef or a restaurateur?
No, not at all. I mean, who knows what'll happen, I guess. I feel like the future still feels very open, and I love to cook. And I should say, the book is not just a memoir, it's also full of recipes. So for anyone who hasn't read it, there are dozens of recipes that relate to the stories. But I don't know, I think I watched how much it took to do a restaurant the right way. And it felt like it had to be a pretty singular passion. And there were other things that I was really driven by and interested in doing. And obviously one of them is writing and the other is art history. I have a PhD in art history, and I really felt always very free and without not an ounce of pressure from my mom to get involved in food and to, pick up the mantle or anything. So there was no pressure, but there was no desire, at least when I was younger. And at the same time, I kind of can't imagine a world without Chez Panisse in it. So there's always a little bit of an open door around, would I ever be involved in the restaurant in its future? It feels possible, but I don't construe or think of myself as a chef per se.
So Alice, are you, knowing what you do about the business, are you glad that Fanny didn't pursue that path, at least yet?
Well, I think she has so many interests. And I know that during the beginning of the restaurant, certainly the first 30 years, it was a really 24/7 almost being there, just all the time, and thinking about food and how to work the kitchen so that everybody collaborated together. And it was a big challenge that took all of my time. And I've always thought of Fanny as having just so many different interests. It's not that she couldn't contribute to the restaurant in a minute, but it's being there first thing in the morning and it's leaving in the night. And that's why I was so lucky to have so many people that were taking care of her when she was young. And it does take a village. And I thought about it so much, about how we should take care of children and feed them as a group of friends. I always wanted to have, one night, my friend Sharon would be cooking for all of us, and the next night, maybe, another friend. And the burden wasn't always on one person, because it's very intense to have that kind of pressure. And it's why I've loved Fanny could make things when she was 8 and set the table, all of that. And I think it's really, really important that everybody cooks in the family, and that you pass it around to different families.
So Fanny, you have had children's books written about you. There was Cafe Fanny, of course, named for you. I mean, one of the books was even made into a play. When you were growing up, was it all sort of at times a bit much to take?
Not really, until I do write about this in the book. When the children's book that came out when I was 8 was turned into a play when I was in high school, I was a little less pleased about that because, it was something that was in fact reviewed in the San Francisco Chronicle and not that favorably. In fact, the headline was Fanny Lacks Spice. And I arrived at high school to have, several copies of the article taped cruelly to my locker. So, I mean, in jest, but, it was high school. I was much more aware of sort of, my mother. And also by that point, when I was a teen, my mom's celebrity was much more visible and palpable, and things were changing too as the internet age was making more visible news items, and more news is proliferating across the world around not just the restaurant, but also the Edible Schoolyard, which she started when I was in middle school. So I had friends at that school when she started the program, and I was sort of embarrassed, but also sort of cautiously optimistic, I guess, like thinking maybe my friends would be into it. And there was that little sort of, I guess, tender age, but I mean, as a kid, when you get to go to a restaurant and the chef comes out and says hello and basically looks at you and just speaks directly to you and asks you what you'd like to eat for dinner that night, and you get to customize your dinner and with so little awareness of just how unusual and exceptional that experience is for anyone else. I mean, I definitely was spoiled rotten in that context. It's not something I was ever aware of in a negative way as a kid. And I loved, when my mom published Fanny at Chez Panisse, I was like 8 or 9, and all these young readers would send me letters. And so I had all these pen pals. And at that point, it was a rather sweet, sort of level of awareness of.
I loved how you answered all of them too.
I was really like devoted pen pal. Yeah.
So we're going to take a couple questions from the audience in another minute. So please get your questions in. But before we go to that, I wanted to ask you, so if Always Home was made into a movie, who would play each of you? Who do you want to play each of you?
Oh my God, what a question. I have not considered that for a moment, but now I want the young actor from Minari to play me.
Oh, that's a good choice. Alice, how about you?
I don't know. I guess I want Jane Fonda.
Oh, that would be really good.
No, it's really hard. Who do you think, Shani?
I wouldn't mind having Cate Blanchett for a mom.
I think we could all go for that. So do we have any questions out there? Everybody's shy.
Everybody's shy.
So let me ask you this, which is there anything that one of you loves to eat that the other does not?
I will start by saying that when I was with my mom these many months over the pandemic, we'd sort of share the cooking and trade off. Usually we cooked together, but there would also be just nights where I would spearhead something and then my mom would cook. And my mom would develop this hilarious shorthand when it was not that she disliked it per se, but it wasn't exactly up her street. She would say, "I respect your ambition," which I loved, and which I almost feel like is the next, some years on, just like, "I respect your ambition." but I cook with a lot of herbs and a lot of spice. I like chili a lot more than my mom. Like I will put bird's eye chilies and serrano chilies and just tons of heat into just about anything I can get away with, which is absolutely an artifact of my upbringing by my father, who can just pop, habaneros. And so there's that. And I think my mom's sort of limit is the like little piment d'Espelette, that like French, really delicious red chili flake that is not particularly spicy. But yeah, I cook with, I think by the end though, Mom, you can speak to this, just the things that I feel like were takeaways in a positive way from my cooking with you for a year. Want to weigh in?
Alice, is there anything that you love to eat that Fanny just doesn't want anything to do with?
Not really. She's ready to eat just about anything. She's much more ambitious than I am. I am, into complete simplicity. And she always, wants more herbs on it, more garlic in it. But she convinced me that cooking beans, you really need to put everything you can imagine into that bean pot while it's cooking. After it's soaked overnight, you put the beans in. She would just go out in the garden, pick all the herbs, make a bouquet garni out of whatever was there, and carrots and celery and garlic and onions and all the spices. And she convinced me, absolutely. They were the most delicious beans. And something else that we always use at Chez Venise is that squeeze of lemon or a little bit of salt at the end when we're doing our tasters. A lemon is great, but she likes to grate it very finely and put it in, and it just opens up everything from a salad to a piece of fish, and it's a beautiful thing.
So we have a couple questions, and tagging on this last one, what are your guilty pleasure foods to eat? Thing that you hate to admit that you just can't get enough of.
What is yours, Fanny?
I'm thinking of yours, Mom.
Which is mine?
Well, we are given this absolutely delicious sort of caramel corn every Christmas by one of the former chefs. She makes it by hand, every Christmas, and deposits a bag of it. And it's just like lethally good. And it's popped corn, like strewn in caramel with like candied pecans and peanuts in it and the right amount of salt. And it's really hard to resist. And my mom has thrown it away outside and then gone out and retrieved it to eaten it because it is so hauntingly good. So it's like, I think of whenever someone asks me that question, that's what I think of for her anyway. I think in a way my guilty thing would just be, I've tried really to eat vegetarian most of the time now. And so when I have like the occasional, and it's still grass fed, but when I have a steak, there like maybe once a month or every couple months, I really think of that as my kind of guilty pleasure now. I really try to eat in a way that is as conscious of climate and its impact as possible. And I just find myself more and more wanting to eat vegetarian anyway. So that occasional steak, though, which I have not completely eschewed, I thankfully have found a really wonderful purveyor down here who has all grass-fed beef. So for that occasional steak every few months, it's always responsibly raised, but it is something that I still feel a little guilty about.
So tagging on to that question, somebody is asking, how has your move, Fanny, to Los Angeles impacted your relationship with your mom? Has it changed in any ways? Made it easier, harder? Well,
I never expected moving in with her. this last year, I mean, of course, I think a lot of people adopted their plans with the pandemic in a way that they absolutely hadn't foreseen. You know, I've been living in a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco, so I'm not seeing her, you know, every day so this, in a way, this last year was a very, very exceptional year in terms of what it was like to be two adults, you know, living and sharing a space together. It was a very different experience than I had, you know, up until I was 18. And then I went to college on the East Coast, and then I moved to England for 11 years, where I really saw my mom very infrequently, except for when she would visit Europe. So in a way, LA is a kind of wonderful, happy medium, because I can hop in the car like I will do this weekend and go visit her and be there for a week, you know, every so often. And she can come visit, as she did last week. So we've already seen each other quite a bit since I moved down here. But I think, you know, we'll see. I really love being in LA. It feels like a great compromise for me, because I also still work in the arts, and to be in a city that has a very vibrant art world, and also an incredible food world and incredible farmers markets. I mean, it's been a joy to discover what's available down here. Just a couple 100 miles down south, and you suddenly have passion fruit, you know, at every other stall, which is just my my absolute dream. So, but at the same time, to still be close enough that I don't feel like I can still get home if I need to.
Well, I may do a project in Los Angeles at the Hammer Museum.
Is that an excuse for you to spend more time with Fanny?
Well, I was trying to decide which came first, but it's a very important project connected to UCLA. And I'm very involved in the big picture of the University of California and food, and how they could really lead the state and pull K through 12 with them. And so I consider that a very important place to focus food. And I have a lot of friends who need jobs, wonderful friends. And so maybe it could really work out well. And I'll have to come down to LA all the time and see Fanny when I'm there. She'll have a chez panisse down there.
So another person asks, what is your all-time favorite meal to enjoy?
Now, the first thing that came to my mind was a bouillabaisse cooked over the wood fire.
Oh,
it's definitely fire for me. Something that's cooked outside or in the fireplace. I love that. Those aromas, whether it's a fish soup or whether it's something that's, you know, a chicken that's grilled.
And Fanny?
My sort of Achilles heel, which I acknowledge in the book, is lobster. So,
oh yes,
there is this, which I will say, very infrequently. Like, I can't even remember the last time I had a lobster. However, actually, no, that's not true. We had a little West Coast lobster in our very special osechi bento box at New Year's, but it's not something I eat often. But there is this entire story devoted to this one lobster salad that we ate in France at the end of a very difficult journey that involved some car sickness. And that salad, which was prepared by this wonderful French chef who had this Michelin-starred restaurant, and I was 9 years old at the time, made this salad according to something that my mom had to describe to him, because he asked me what I wanted to eat, and I asked for a sort of chez panisse style lobster salad, which is my ideal meal. I think is beautiful greens, you know, little cherry tomatoes, a very sort of zesty shalloty vinaigrette, and just a little bit of lobster strewn in there. I realize it feels a little special for some, but it's just it's probably my last meal if I had to choose one.
So I have to say I'm surprised by it's not Dungeness crab, but lobster.
I know. I love Dungeness crab. I do. I don't know how lobster crept into the sort of my consciousness. I'm sure it's because I was a restaurant kid and they did crop up on the menu. But I always loved the ritual, I think, more than anything, of opening, of, cracking it and preparing it and everything that it required, and getting to take the little legs and sucking on them like a straw, just having that kind of real effort put in, and then the reward of getting to eat the delicious sweet flesh.
So since we're all getting hungry listening to this, we wanted to ask you to share a recipe, one of your favorites, and if you could tell us what it is and why this is so meaningful to you.
Well, I thought a nice one to talk about would be coming home pasta, because I feel like that's the recipe that if I can describe any recipe in the book as having had a slightly viral life, it was this one over the course of the pandemic, because I think it spoke to how much you can do with very little, actually, and how you can make something really delicious and really nourishing out of just a few sort of very spare ingredients. And I remember at the beginning of the pandemic a year ago, we were in a real panic around what we could provision with and how much we had in our cupboards, and, were we going to have any greens? I mean, I remember steaming just vats of kale and freezing it, thinking like we wouldn't have access to fresh greens. And this pasta requires absolutely nothing. It's, it's what we would prepare for ourselves when my mom and I, and my father too, and when we come back from long trips, and there's just next to nothing in the refrigerator and next to nothing in the pantry. And this was a kind of very dependable, beloved family recipe. So it's essentially kind of a white puttanesca. Wouldn't you agree, Mom?
Yeah.
And you just, you start by locating some hopefully decent garlic. So that has enough firm, you still need the cloves to have a kind of firmness to them and not have gone off. But if you have a couple good cloves of garlic, you saute those in some olive oil, and then you kind of poke around for other things. So usually capers we would keep in the fridge under salt. And there would usually be a little tin of anchovies or some salted anchovies, or maybe a jar of them under oil. And my mom keeps a really beautiful garden in the backyard, where we cultivate mostly lettuce and herbs. And so there'd always be some herbs out there that you could go get. She'd send me out when I was a kid, and she was the one making it. She'd send me out to go get parsley, so that she could put anchovies into the pan when I was outside and wouldn't know. This was the moment to introduce anchovies if we had them, because at the time I would really bristle at the inclusion. I now love anchovies, it should be said. So some chopped anchovies would go into the garlic as it's beginning to cook. And then capers too at the beginning will help, you can sort of fry them in the oil along with the garlic. And then chili flakes, and you just, while that's sort of cooking away, and then you want to be careful not to burn the garlic. You're just boiling a pot of water, and whatever pasta you have will do. So sometimes there would be a few pots going because we only had, enough of spaghetti for one person and a handful of some rigatoni for the other person. And so there'd be a kind of makeshift patchwork of dinner. But you also hopefully have a little ancient nubbin of Parmesan in your fridge that you can grate in there too. And that would be what we would kind of put together as the thing that would really satisfy you when you came home. It's so fragrant and it's so flavorful. There's so much umami from the anchovy and the caper and the garlic, and the cheese at the end. And then hopefully you have a lemon handy so you can zest.
I was going to say
as my mom was telling me. Lemon zest over top, and some fresh parsley or oregano, or even a little savory is nice in there too. And that is something that people have written me so much over this last year and just said like they make coming home pasta at least once a week, or it's the recipe that they had been looking for and never quite knew how to do, the easiest pasta recipe, but somehow this one that really feels sort of deeply nourishing.
Well, I love that it's something you can make with anything in the fridge and out of the pantry, especially during this time when we've all been so stuck at home and limiting our trips to the grocery store. So we did have one question. Actually, I don't remember this part from the book, but why do you guys prefer balsamic-free vinaigrette?
Well, I have to speak to that.
Okay.
Because I was pretty much trained in Italy that balsamic vinegar was something very, very special. The way that it was made, it's why it's so expensive. And you drizzled it over some Parmesan cheese, but it was never, ever really in a vinaigrette. Wow. And I think it came part of a vinaigrette because it is sweet, vinegary taste. And I think Americans wanted, a sweet salad dressing. And so it became omnipresent. And for me, the thing that I love about salad is that it's sort of cleansing your palate, that it's not weighting it down with sweetness. And I've always been kind of offended by the idea of putting balsamic in a salad.
But also because balsamic wasn't true balsamic for the most part.
Yeah, that's true.
It wasn't what began to be marketed in the US, especially, and now, also in Italy on every bistro table to satisfy tourists, was essentially a kind of grape juice, like barely it was very low acidity and often with added sugar, and it was not aged. So it didn't have the quality of a balsamic that actually spends time in barrel, where it takes on a lot more nuance of flavor and the sugars, it's thicker, it has a different viscosity and a different quality. And so it's more a sort of revulsion around that kind of balsamic, the kind of like liquid grape juice, basically, which was marketed as vinegar. But I agree absolutely with my mom that I want a salad always that like cuts through dinner, that really gives you this sense of the end of a meal, which is also why at the end of Thanksgiving, we always have salad, which is, very untraditional, but which everyone just kind of moan about as it's getting passed around, like how could we eat another bite? And then this, bright, bitter chicory salad circulates, and it's like the thing that almost feels like a digestivo, like it helps you actually process your meal. It really has that quality of not just on your palate, but also in your gut in a way, that kind of palliative effect.
So do you shake your head then at the American tradition of having salad before the entree as opposed to after, like Europeans do?
We do a bit of both. At the restaurant, we eat it first.
But it's with something. And I love salad. I love greens. And I'm thinking of the French meals I had when I was first went to France when I was 19. And watercress was always someplace in the meal, whether it was with the main dish or a little watercress salad with walnuts in it or walnut oil. And I can't let go of that. It's really part of a Chez Panisse meal. If it's not first, there's some way it's coming in. It always. And I like also to just have that bowl, and for special dinners that we have at the restaurant, we'll put a bowl of salad on the table right after the entree, and people can eat it and sort of use it on the same plate as their main dish. And very French that was for me.
Although it's almost like our bread, it's like you have an extra pot of salad set down so you can mop up the juice as opposed to a basket of bread.
So since the theme of Silicon Valley Reads this year is all about connecting, and this year has been such a challenge for people to do that, I wanted to ask each of you, how have you made a real effort to connect and stay connected to the people who mean so much to you? Do you have advice for other people?
Well, I can say that I've had just the greatest experience of going out on the front porch and somebody's left me something like a loaf of bread. My good friend Steve Sullivan, who owns Acme Bread Company, he and I have known each other since he was a kid. I mean, back in the 70s, he was a busboy at Chez Panisse. And we've always communicated in this kind of beautiful way that he wants me to taste a bread that's new or whatever. And right now, he brings me an edible schoolyard loaf of whole grain bread, and he puts it on the front porch. And I just about cry. And he's just been dropping it off as he goes home every day on his bike. And I've been leaving him a little something. But it's such a beautiful gift. And I have this tradition of giving people Kishu mandarins when they come into season in January and February. And I mail them around to people who live in the snow on the East Coast. And and to Washington, to people I'm trying to influence. And this year...
Kishu diplomacy is what it's called.
That's right.
We should give some to Congress, right?
I do. And to Supreme Court judges and all the rest. But this year, I've received the most beautiful messages back of just how much they meant to them to have that gift. And it's just so sweet and little. They're like this tiny ones. They peel so easily. But I think that, well, of course, you know that I think food is about love. And to give somebody something that you've made or you've grown. Many people are making jams and canning fruits in different ways, and they have extra jars and they want to share them with friends. I love that. And I made a victory garden. I dug up the front yard, which was flowers and whatnot. And I just planted vegetables and herbs and salad. We were afraid that we wouldn't be able to get salad. And I put a victory garden sign up by it. And people just, left me little notes like, I'm going to do this with my front yard. And do you mind if I pick something? And of course, that's why it's there. It is why it's there. And I think that that no matter what it is, that if you make it yourself, particularly, and offer it, it is very, very meaningful to both people.
And Fanny, what about you? How have you been connecting?
It's been really hard. I'm so used to cooking for dozens of people, and I really like that's what people identified with me, was like having dinner parties all the time and having people to my home all the time. And it was really nice to have my mom's very big backyard where you could sort of reasonably, have people at a distance and make some food. And I did that from time to time, but that was even challenging, not being able to have the same kind of comfort around, touching things and sharing things. It's been really an adjustment. But I think, like what my mom is saying, I think, one thing I have been doing is cooking with friends on Zoom. So we'll make the same meal. We'll have like relatively the same ingredients. And I was doing that. And actually it's still, in fact, I have a date with all of my girlfriends in London to make coming home pasta in the next
Oh,
week.
that's so great.
Which of course is, like I said, one of the easiest things for a lot of different people of different skill levels to make. So that's something that I have really relished, but it's been hard. Just keeping tabs on my friends and talking to them as much as I can. And making these dates, these little culinary dates, has been a way to feel really connected.
And Alice, how has Chez Panisse weathered this whole past year?
Yeah, it's been very difficult to pivot from an experience of cooking that has always been collaborative, and we're all tasting and, using our hands freely, and to go to making food and putting it in a box. And just even getting it in the box in a way that is aesthetically pleasing is quite a challenge. But I have to say, the one thing that has really kept the restaurant alive, if you will, is the fact that we're so rigidly seasonal. So when the tomatoes are over, they're over. They're over. And we're on to the next thing. And so even though we're doing salads in a box and this kind of fruit tart and it's changing all the time. And it's great for the customers, and it's also great for us. If we didn't have a changing menu and we had to do that, over and over and over again, I think it would be so difficult to keep the chefs engaged and just the spirit of the restaurant alive. And so I love even the flowers that we sell at the Sunday Farmers Market are about the flowers of that moment in time. And so we went from magnolias, and now I anticipating tulips, and it's very important. I've always known that was important for me in terms of eating food that is completely ripe. You have to eat locally and seasonally, and of course, organically. But I didn't know it would be such a force for keeping us psychologically engaged as it has been. It's been really, really important.
And when you say the Sunday Farmers Market, that's actually at the restaurant. So the restaurant very early on started doing farm boxes just to make sure that the farmers were able to get their produce to consumers, because the restaurant was not functioning as a restaurant at the beginning of the pandemic. So it was just doing vegetable boxes, which were like the best produce imaginable, but it was coming directly from the farmers who provide to Chez Panisse. And that was an imperative for my mom, was to make sure that the people upon whom the restaurant depends were still earning a livelihood and having a way to distribute their goods and their beautiful produce. And so the sort of vestige of that as the restaurant transitioned into doing takeout is to have this market on Sundays where you can get these beautiful vegetable boxes and all these other products that are from the family of purveyors who sell to Chez. So it's like, that's kind of a beautiful feature now. It's right alongside the restaurant in the car park that's right kind of behind the post office there. And it's become this really vibrant, beautiful market.
But we can only do that one day a week. And so the other days of the week, we have a little marketplace in the courtyard in front of the restaurant. And we're doing these 3-course meals. And I have one in the other room. I do a lot of tasting. And it's so important that I'm giving feedback about everything, but they're spoiling me right now. And
so people, I think, are things are getting better little by little, but everyone still very much wants to help however they can. The restaurants, the farmers. How would you say is the best way to lend a hand or to help support the people that make our communities so wonderful?
Definitely to buy at the farmer's market, to go and purchase everything you can there directly at the place. Right at the bakery that's doing the bread that you love. But it's also really important to have that feedback from people that they liked it, or that's so gratifying to hear those get messages back to the restaurant owner to say, I love that, or even little critical things, but to be engaged. We are probably, because we're such a small restaurant, we can't social distance and be open. We have to wait till there aren't any protocols. And that's going to be a while longer. I mean, it may go into next year. We're not sure. And we're going to have to celebrate our 50th birthday virtually. But stay tuned.
Oh, no. Are you really? Oh,
I don't think there's any way we can be open.
What do you have planned?
Well, I'm trying to make a little movie.
Oh.
Sort of the history of the restaurant. Not a big movie, but a small movie that sort of begins, back there in 1971.
So the actual date of the anniversary is
August 28th, 1971.
So you'll be doing a movie, and anything else that people can get excited about?
Well, I'm hoping for a lot of things, but it would be so exciting to really have the universe just sort of make it full circle for me, for the free speech movement, back to, really taking food seriously and understanding how important it is for students, not just the K through 12, but the generation that really can change the world there. And they need to learn about stewardship and community and nourishment and take care of the farmers who take care of us.
So, Fanny, the last question of the night. Do you have any more books planned? Because you've got a ways to go to catch your mom,
I know. A very high bar. Not at the moment. I have sort of things. I mean, many people have written me little messages and said, when is Everything Tastes Better with Lime coming out? Which is a joke cookbook that I refer to in my book that my mom and I are co-writing in theory. Although at the end of pandemic, she said, maybe it should be lemon, because we were just using lemons all the time, foraging them in the neighborhood. It turns out, now that I've walked every street in Berkeley, that there are a lot of lemon trees in
Myers,
on the streets of Berkeley.
Well, I guess I have to.
Oh, this is a perfect place for my mom.
Oh, I have yours here too, Fanny.
Oh, thanks, Mom.
But this is coming out in June, and it's called We Are What We Eat. a slow food manifesto.
Oh, that's exciting. That's wonderful. Well, I want to thank you both for making this such a wonderful event. And I know you guys can't give applause over Zoom, but I hope you will give a hand to Fanny and Alice for joining us tonight for this very special event. And thank you to all of you out there for joining us. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. It was such a pleasure to
Really?
speak with
Thank
you.
you.
And thank you, Silicon Valley Reads, for having us.
Yes.